Hello everyone, welcome back to my review and revisit series. Today I will be recounting my thoughts on an app that I've been using for a while called Choices. For those of you who don't know, this is a choose your own adventure or point of view app that has a ton of stories that you can play through. I decided to start off by rereading one of the first books they came out with, and one of the first books that I read called The Freshman. Before I continue, I'd like to mention that there will be spoilers for this series, obviously. If you haven't finished reading this series and do not want spoilers, then you probably shouldn't continue watching. And if you're not interested in Choices content or hearing a reread-review of this book, this video simply just isn't for you. This is also PG-13 content and is not recommended for children under the age of 13. For this video specifically, I will be covering the first 3 books of the Freshman series, so this will include possible language and slightly mature themes. Now, on to the review. When I first read this series, I was quite young, and I don't feel like I was old enough to fully grasp being in the shoes of a freshman in college. But now that I've finished my freshman year of college, I feel like I better understand the plot, the characters, and the overall themes of the story. This series, honestly, was never my favorite. It is cheesy, and I'm not the biggest fan of the MC, or main character. She is quite nosy, and oh, my voice just cracked, sorry about that. And it should be noted that this is a gender-locked book, and you can only play as a female, so I will be referring to the MC as a she. I also don't like that in the first book you're kind of forced to pick a love interest. I think you also end up kissing at least one of them no matter what, which is annoying, but please correct me if I'm wrong, considering that not all players may want to do that. Maybe they're ace, maybe they just don't like any of the love interests. Like, I feel like you shouldn't be forced into that situation as the player. However, I am glad that I revisited this series because it was very, very nostalgic, and I caught a lot of things that I overlooked before, and I definitely changed my perspective from the first, I think I've replayed this once, so like the first 2 times I read it. So I will start with a recap of how I felt about book 1. Of course, that's where I started, and since I've read this story before, I knew that I wouldn't be romancing any of the 3 original love interests. I have my reasons for this. Zig and Becca. But I also wanted to keep myself open to a new route, and I wanted to explore different perspectives that I shut out the first time I read this. So, naturally, I flirted with all 3 love interests just to see which one seemed the most interesting and most appealing to me. After the first few chapters, I decided to go for the James route. The first 2 times I played this book, I always did the Chris route, and it was fine, but I wanted to try something new. And to be honest, I much prefer James's route, at least for now. His development is much more interesting to me. He goes from being aloof and seemingly uninterested in the main character to genuinely showing that he cares about the player, whether you romance him or not. I feel like the other 2 love interests, especially Chris, don't really change all that much in this book. So that kind of steered me away because I'm very big on character development. And I also appreciate that James calls out the main character when she does something that he doesn't agree with. Chris is a sweetheart, but he gives such mixed signals through book 1, and I found myself steering away from him because of that. Obviously, he's an adult. He can make his own decisions and be friends with whoever he wants, even if one of those people is a mean girl. However, if I'm gonna be pursuing someone, I don't want to be trying to do so when they're hanging out with somebody who's being nasty to me. I don't feel like I have to try to win them over just to prove a point, or just because like we had a little thing going on. I didn't really feel the need to do that anymore, because that's what I did feel like when I was, I don't know, like a couple years ago, but yeah, I didn't feel the need to do that this time, and I felt kind of like steered away from Chris because of that. Like if he's into me, he'll find his way back over and he'll win me back over, but I'm not going to spend all my time trying to win someone over when there are other people I can chill with that aren't spending time with somebody who's bullying me. No hate to any Chris romancers, but that's how I felt rereading it. And then we have Caitlin. I think she's cool. She's pretty as hell, but my opinion on her didn't really change from when I first played the book. I see her more as a friend than I do as a love interest. That's just how I feel. I'm all for the lesbian route, and again, since I was exploring all the routes, I did end up kissing her just to see how I felt about the storyline. But again, I felt more of a friendship with her than I did a romance, and thus just kind of decided to keep my relationship with her platonic for the rest of the series. I definitely understand the appeal. Like, again, she's really, really pretty. And she, at the beginning at least, is the only female love interest, so I understand if you prefer to pursue a female, like, definitely go for it. But that's just not how I felt, at least for this particular story. As for the overall plot, it's fine. I didn't find it too engaging, and it's pretty straightforward. I guess the goal is generally impress Professor Vasquez to keep your scholarship, because you lose, like, your parents, like, lose money at the beginning or whatever. And basically do whatever Professor Vasquez tells you and figure out who you want to take to the end of semester dance. Or quarter. Maybe this is a quarter system. I don't know. However, I honestly didn't remember a lot of the events that happened in the book, and some bits actually caught me off guard. Like, I didn't remember Caitlin getting drunk and then having to go to the hospital, or Abby's mini arc with her sister and, like, being apart from her family, which is a new experience for her. Like, those little tidbits really kept me engaged and made me care about the characters more. So I loved all those smaller moments like that. As for diamonds, which, the currency within the game, I spent a couple on a few different outfits to affect my standing in the story, and also now that I have VIP, I refuse to let my MC wear an ugly outfit. And I may have used some on a scene or two, I don't really remember, but I definitely regret spending diamonds on Abby and Tyler, because once the next book comes around, you can just lie when it asks you about the settings and say that they went together even when they didn't. And anything you get for paying diamonds isn't too significant as far as I remember. I don't feel like I gained anything from it, other than, like, one-upping. Is it Layla or Leia? I don't remember. I believe it's Layla, but I probably screwed up her name, so I apologize in advance. So you don't really have to spend diamonds on them, and the same can be said for Zach and Brandon, the other couple that you can set up. So you don't really need to spend diamonds at all to get an overall good outcome. Again, not the biggest fan of this main character, and I don't like how you're kind of forced to string along a love interest, because again, I'm going to be romancing Zig, and that's what I end up doing. But I was excited to continue. In the second book, I feel like things start picking up more. We know the characters at this point and can now dive deeper into their more personal struggles and ambitions. I think that when I first did a read of the book, I got really annoyed with all of the love interests for getting mad at the MC, but now I definitely can see and understand their points of view a lot better. All of them, even if you're acting out of concern and trying to be a good friend, have the right to be upset just with the situation in general. And I know that is a hot take, but I'll start with Caitlin. The MC definitely should have been more considerate towards Caitlin's coming out dilemma. Coming out is hard, and it can be very scary, even when you're in a supportive environment. And when you're in an environment where there's no certainty to how things are going to turn out, it's even scarier, I can only imagine. And this is especially true for Caitlin, because her parents are very visibly traditional. It's implied that she lives in a more conservative town, and it's understandable why she felt like they might not accept her, and felt that her community back home might not accept her, and felt all that anxiety surrounding the acceptance of her identity. Obviously, she didn't handle things perfectly, but keep in mind, these characters are probably like 18 or 19 years old, maybe a little older, like James, if they're upperclassmen. I mean, I'm that age. I sure as hell don't make perfect decisions, and nor does anyone at any point in their life. So I'm definitely not going to be one to bash Caitlin for the way she was acting. Obviously, like I said, didn't make the best decisions. and did end up making things harder for herself. But, sometimes that just happens, and you just gotta be there for your friends when that happens. The MC has good intentions, but sometimes you just need to take a back seat for a moment because people might just really need space. And seriously, when I tell people that I need space and will only get more agitated if I don't get said space. So I definitely think that the MC should have been more considerate towards Caitlin's situation, especially since it's implied that the MC, even if you're playing as a straight person, that they also are LGBT, possibly, or she is. So, yeah. But yeah, so I just felt like they could have been more considerate, but now I'll move on to Chris for now. Chris's arc is by far the most annoying to me in this story because all of your friends end up, sabotaging the competition when he's running for president, obviously, and it was by far the most avoidable feud. Sebastian, who's running against Chris, is obviously a jackass and definitely deserved to get his karma, but stooping to his level was not the way to go, especially since Chris's high road plan would have actually worked regardless, and he proves that later. Frankly, this is more of a writing issue for me, and I'm glad that Chris is noble enough to take the high ground, but this mini arc just proves that communication is key and that you need to run through things by your friends if you're gonna do something, because he had a plan. He could have explained that. They could have avoided this whole situation. The other two arcs, in my opinion, feel much more realistic, and this is why Chris's arc annoyed me the most, because they just suddenly decide to hack Sebastian's computer or whatever, with a little help from Becca. But yeah, that arc was just annoying to me. Okay. For James's arc, I have a very hot take, at least from what I've seen. So please don't hate on me if you have a different opinion. I'd love to hear it in the comments, and I completely respect it, but here's mine, and this is how I felt personally. James's arc, to me, is by far the most understandable, at least it's the most realistic. His and Caitlin's are the most realistic, in my opinion. Because I guess since I was doing the James to Zig route, it may have been a little bit easier for me to just kind of overlook this. Because I know people who were romancing James were very upset. And people blame James for reacting poorly to the whole situation, which I'll kind of touch on in just a second. The MC either has the option basically to keep Professor Vasquez's failing health, which we find out at the end of book 1, a secret, or betray the professor's trust and tell James, which devastates him for obvious reasons. In all honesty, James has a right to be upset. Of course, he isn't entitled to be told anything about Professor Vasquez's health, obviously. But it would be very upsetting to know that someone you're close to is dying and that your friend kept it from you no matter the reasoning. As frustrating as it is as the main character, it's realistic and feelings are valid, but I definitely understand why this turns people away from James. I mean, I wasn't going to romance him anyway, so I guess I didn't really care, but a lot of people really hate him for this. But I guess it just didn't affect me as much for said reasons. And crap like this happens in real life too. There was a misunderstanding, miscommunication, and you just kind of just turn off from people for a little while, and eventually both the MC and James come to an understanding and reconcile. And personally, I do think 100% that keeping Vasquez's secret is the right thing to do. And regardless what you do, you and James do have a fallout. So keeping the one person's trust seems to be the best option, because otherwise you're just pissing off two people, and that's not good. Yeah. But speaking of Vasquez, he becomes so interesting and more tolerable and enjoyable throughout this book. And I'm going to be honest, his passing did hit me a little harder than I thought it would. I knew it was coming, obviously. I've read the book twice, but I feel like I absorbed his development more this time around. And I love his character because he definitely has his flaws. He is by no means perfect, but he grows as a person. And I think his overall character is fantastic. I also like how he kind of becomes a recurring like theme and influence on the main character through the rest of the freshmen and through the sophomore and the junior and all that too. I also like this book better because you can kind of choose to stay single for the most part, or at least act as if you're single, which makes going into book 3 so much easier. Overall, I definitely enjoyed this book more than the first one and was excited to hop into book 3 from there. My main critique for the third book is that it follows almost the exact same format as the second book. You get in a conflict with all 3, well, I guess now 4. You get in a conflict with all 4 love interests, have fallouts, and then end up resolving everything in the end while leaning on your other sweetmates throughout the process. Other than that, I rather enjoyed this book. Again, like book 2, it engages with all of the characters more, while book 1 is kind of steered more towards Caitlin's story and especially Chris's story. But now I'll get into each individual conflict again. I'll start with Chris. I actually don't really mind his conflict at the beginning because he starts prioritizing his presidency because that's his job at this point. So I do give him a lot of slack for like being a no-show for a lot of different events. It makes sense. Like he's busy, he's got a job to do, he has responsibility. That makes sense. Until he calls Caitlin's concert dumb and doesn't follow through with his promises. Like, dude, the biggest issue here is that you promised things and then didn't deliver. And then he acts like being on the student council superior to going to quote unquote, like, I don't remember exactly what he said, but like dumb concerts and following through with new hobbies. If there's anything I learned from my freshman year, it's that diversity in activities is what makes the environment all the more engaging. Yeah. So that really bugged me. And I was really annoyed with him when he did that. But I did find myself the least annoyed with Chris out of all of the love interests, to be fair. I just think that he shouldn't have made promises he couldn't have delivered on, because that just reflected badly on him. But yeah, next I'll go to James. I definitely understand that he was being manipulated and was put in a tough position due to said manipulation and the work he had done in the previous book, like putting on the play and having it turned into a movie. But good lord, was it frustrating just to get him to realize how toxic the situation he was in. I have some sympathy for him because many people do go through experiences like this in real life and learn from it, which he does, but you'd think that he'd trust his friend who helped him bring the play to life over a pretty clearly manipulative person, especially considering how obvious it is that the story that he wrote that's getting adapted is getting completely changed. If you're going to make sacrifices to follow your dreams, make sure that your dream is actually coming true, not spiraling to something you never wanted while being held captive to someone with malicious intentions. I would like to mention I am in no way gaslighting or victim blaming James. Being in an abusive situation sometimes takes time to see, especially when you're in a situation that could end up highly beneficial. I mean, I totally get it. I'm a writer, I'm an actor, I want to go into the entertainment field. But it sucks when your friend is warning you about something and you're too caught up in the situation to realize that they're right until it's too late. Now, honestly, Caitlin's was the most annoying to me because I loved her upbeat, friendly, like outgoing persona in the first 2 books, but she almost does a complete 180 in this book. People do change, and that's not a bad thing at all, especially if it seems to be benefiting them positively. But clearly, joining the Gutter Kittens negatively affected Caitlin, her attitude, and her relationship with all of the sweetmates. And, even if Natasha, the leader of the Gutter Kittens, was a quote-unquote bad influence on Caitlin, it was still her decision to go along with her and to go along with her attitude. And it just ended up getting in a really toxic situation where Natasha was talking bad about the MC and about Abby, and Caitlin was just like, oh, she's just joking. Like, no, if your friend's feelings are getting hurt, it's not a joke. And if a person really was just joking, they would be like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, but gosh, like when people keep doing that, I just can't stand that. So that was really, really annoying. But I have major respect, and this is a minor character shout out, major respect to Amara, one of the other band members, for keeping things cool and being friendly to everyone despite her friends doing otherwise. And she eventually ends up like standing up and being like, no, like I don't want this, like you're being a jerk. And I really like her. I'm glad that I set her up with a cool guy like Darren, who was the former captain of the football team. Their relationship is really underrated. I think it's sweet and it's genuine, and I like them both as characters. And now I'm going to move on to Zig, my pursued love interest in this book, who just shows up. I have a lot of respect for his character, and I definitely related to him a lot as a fellow Latina bisexual kid that's like figuring things out. Zig is a good person with good intentions, but he has his flaws just like everyone else. He has a habit of taking violence to a level that it shouldn't go to, and due to his upbringing, is understandably closed off and protective of his friends and family and himself because of the situation he's in. But he overall has a really solid personality and character. And I'm glad that he ends up coming through for the MC and for Chris in the end and helps them like get this scholarship set up for students like him. So I definitely appreciate his character. And like, yeah, he messes up. Everybody messes up in this book. But overall, he improves on himself. And because of that, I really have respect for his character. Overall, this book was enjoyable. And I think my favorite out of the three at this point. But I would have enjoyed it more if it followed a slightly less format than the previous book. But I love that Becca, your former bully, and Zig become options here. And personally, I actually prefer them to the OG three. I ended up picking Zig for reasons I've already stated. I don't know. I just feel like I need to date one of my fellow bisexuals if that's an option. And Zig is my type, like I feel like in real life. So it just made it easier for me to pick him this time around. Becca is a very good character and gets some amazing development. I think she might be like the best overall character in the story, at least in my opinion, but she's still working on herself at this point, so I wasn't quite like drawn to her yet. I feel like maybe I might replay and do a Becca route just to see it, because I heard it's great, and I would totally be down for that, but you know, I saved the route for Zig this time. Overall, it was fun to revisit this series, especially since it's one of the first choices books that I played. I think now that I've completed my freshman year in college, I appreciate it a lot more. I also replayed the sophomore and the rest of the series, the junior and the senior, but I didn't really get into it as much. I feel like the quality kind of goes up and down from there. So I'm not planning on doing a full review of it. If you want to hear my thoughts on it, I can make a future video, or I can answer any questions in the comments section. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. My videos for The Crown and the Flame and Most Wanted should be up soon, and I'm currently rereading Rules of Engagement. So, and I'll probably be doing the stories in order of when they came out, just to make it easier for myself, but I can change the order if people want a review of a particular series or book. I am also currently rewatching Ninjago, Lego Ninjago, and My Little Pony. So if you want my reviews on those, please subscribe so that you can see the videos when they come out. I already have the first seasons out on my channel. And I'm also open to suggestions on what to watch next for any more reaction reviews. Thank you for watching, and drop a like if you enjoyed, or I should say thank you for listening. Please drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye!